On October 17th, 1990, 31 years ago, the world was introduced to Bardock, the father of Goku, when the first Dragon Ball Z TV special aired in Japan. As Dragon Ball Z's popularity spread across the world, Bardock became a fan favorite character in many different languages and cultures. And recently in the Dragon Ball Super manga, Bardock has returned once again with a new backstory connecting him to Planet Cereal and Granola. Now, a few years ago, I did do an edition of Dragon Ball In Depth here on the channel discussing the history of Bardock, and I followed it up with the episode of Bardock Dragon Ball In Depth. But today, on this edition of Dragon Ball In Depth, I want to give you the entire history of Toriyama's Bardock. Not the original from 1990, more so the 2013 reimagining of Bardock by series creator Akira Toriyama that would be portrayed in Dragon Ball Minus, Dragon Ball Super Broly, and now the Dragon Ball Super manga. 99% of all Dragon Ball characters appeared in the manga first and were later adapted to the anime, but Bardock was not one of those cases. In fact, Bardock may be one of the only characters during the original run of Dragon Ball to appear in the anime first. Bardock was a collaborative effort with the producers of Dragon Ball Z, the anime, back in 1990, and Akira Toriyama. October 1990 is when the original Bardock special aired on television in place of a Dragon Ball Z episode, and that was the world's first look at Bardock. And then later on, Toriyama would adapt that Bardock into his manga during a scene where Frieza first confronts Son Goku and remembers the resemblance between Goku and his father. As a result of that, if you're one of those people that likes to keep track of what is canon and what is not canon, Toriyama took a concept that he did not come up with, which was Bardock, the father of Goku, and canonized him into the manga. But things are never that simple when it comes to Dragon Ball. So because the Bardock that appeared in the manga closely resembles the one that was in the TV special, many fans, including myself, just assumed that the events of the TV special, the events that were portrayed in that, was the actual backstory behind Bardock and the destruction of Planet Vegeta. So for almost a decade and a half, that's what we all expected. Toriyama never really told the backstory behind Bardock in the manga or in anything he wrote. In fact, he once commented that he loved the TV special, but it was a bit too dark compared to the stuff he normally writes. Which is true, because at the time, Toriyama was really more so still a gag manga writer. Although Dragon Ball had gotten pretty serious with the martial arts action, he was still known in Japan because of Dr. Slump and because of the popularity of that as a comedy writer. But even with that being said, Bardock and the special seem to coincide with the events that were discussed in the Dragon Ball manga. That is, until 2013. Toriyama pretty much retired from writing manga weekly when Dragon Ball ended in 1995. He did a few one-shots here and there and a couple of little pieces of art and worked on some video games and whatnot, but as far as him being a weekly manga writer, which he had been since the late 70s, those days were far and away behind him. However, in 2013, Toriyama's pen returned to begin a mini-series called Jaco the Galactic Patrolman, which would be Toriyama coming back to doing a consistent serialized manga, albeit a short one, but still, he came back to tell a new story with multiple chapters that were later compiled into one book. And the big surprise, which was kind of kept a secret until the very end of Jaco, is that Jaco acts as a bit of a prequel to the story of Dragon Ball, introducing Bulma's sister Tights, the Galactic Patrol being an actual entity in the Dragon Ball world, and actually showing us the connection between Jaco and Kakarot. Now, with that being said though, Toriyama would take it a step further and give us a bonus chapter called Dragon Ball Minus, which would be his vision, his interpretation of the events that occurred during the final days of Planet Vegeta, and telling the story of Bardock, but also introducing Goku's mother Gine for the very first time, which was hyped up as a pretty big deal because folks had wondered for years who Goku's mother actually was. Some had speculated that it was one of Bardock's teammates from the special. Some have said that we never saw her, and now we finally saw a design for what would be Toriyama's version of Goku's mother, Gine, and Toriyama's version of Bardock, which greatly differed from the Bardock that we saw in the TV special. So the way that things stand now, there are two different Bardocks. It truly is a tale of two Bardocks, as we have the original Bardock created by Takao Koyama for the Z anime, and we have the Bardock that Toriyama would create and pretty much retcon in Dragon Ball Minus in 2013. Please keep in mind that if the only version of the Bardock special you've watched is the English dub, it's absolutely an atrocious script. There are countless changes to the story and to Bardock's motivations as a character in the dub version. So if you haven't seen it in Japanese, you need to, so you fully get context for how Bardock really was in the TV special. Even Sonny Strait and Sean Schemmel and other actors who I've interviewed here on the channel have expressed interest in redubbing this special because of how bad the script was back in the late 90s, but unfortunately it's never come to pass because Funimation does not want to pay for it. Just a quick tidbit I wanted to throw at you before we go any further. Now, when it comes to Bardock, in the original special, he really did not care about his son until he was inflicted with the curse of being able to see the future and saw that his planet would be destroyed by Frieza and that it would be Goku who would eventually take down Frieza and defeat him many, many years in the future. Before then, Bardock did not give a damn about Goku. But the Bardock that appeared in Dragon Ball Minus and later Dragon Ball Super Broly was a different story. Toriyama himself comments on this. He was asked about Bardock's personality, so Toriyama commented that Bardock, while being warlike, but compared to others in his race who are cold-hearted and have simple thoughts, he happens to possess calm judgment and a small measure of humanity. Toriyama would go on to say that he has actions of saving his companions, which is rare, and he's greatly adored among a portion of the low-class warriors, which we actually saw a little bit of this in Dragon Ball Super Broly. Toriyama would actually elaborate even more on his character and his relationship with Gine in the same Q&A when he revealed that Gine, at some point in the distant past, was teammates with Bardock on a 4-person team, and that's how they first met. He would go on to say that Gine was never cut out as a warrior, she was too gentle, and she was constantly being saved by Bardock. So, the Bardock that Toriyama is writing in Dragon Ball Minus, Broly, and now Dragon Ball Super's recent manga chapters is much more of a caring guy. He's kind of a hero, whereas the original Bardock was more of a dirtbag who wound up trying to change the future after seeing how grim it would become, and of course failing to prevent his people from being the victims of a mass genocide. Falling in love with Gine gave Bardock much more empathy as a character, and he became much more kind-hearted than any other version of Bardock. And I know some fans really, really like this, and others absolutely despise it. It just depends on what you like and what you don't like. And everyone has a right to their own opinion. Toriyama definitely added a bit of romantic flair, which is not typical for him as a writer with these two characters. Bardock really became a different person compared to the rest of his race. But this does cause a very unique retcon of the original Dragon Ball manga and the original story. In the original story, when Goku, that is to say Kakarot, landed on Earth, he was pretty out of control. And it wasn't until he hit his head that he became a loving, normal boy. But in this new backstory, Goku was always loving and was never really that violent. And these are things stated inside the actual manga. This is not something that was changed in the dub or anything like that. This is in the original story Toriyama told. So that begs the question, was Goku just having a bad day and then he hit his head? Or is this just a thing where Toriyama forgot about how Goku hit his head in the original manga, and now he wants to retcon it into stating that he was kind-hearted because his parents were? That's a tough one to decipher. You can make up your own headcanon to where it makes sense, but personally, the idea of Goku hitting his head, I've always thought was a cool one because it's sort of like a happenstance. Goku was sent to Earth to destroy it, and instead, because of a little bump on his head, he wound up becoming its greatest savior. And if I'm being honest, I prefer that version. I like that story a lot. This version just makes it seem like Kakarot inherited his kindness, and to me, it's just not as interesting. Now that we have all of the behind-the-scenes information out of the way, in the next section I want to go into the backstory of Bardock, not just his ties to Granola, but also what happened in Dragon Ball Minus. And we're going to go into a few more retcons because Toriyama also changed some of Frieza's motivation as well as Goku, which we just discussed a minute ago. So let's get to that right now. Before the destruction of Planet Vegeta, Bardock had another adventure that we recently found out about in Dragon Ball Super's manga with the planet Cereal. In this story arc, we find out that part of Frieza's force, there was an invasion on the planet by the Saiyans, and they transformed into their Uzaru forms and began to rampage and destroy everything. During the scuffle, Bardock notices a lone Cerealian woman and her child scared to death. And while everything's going down, the Cerealians manage to destroy the moon, and Bardock reverts down to his base form. But even as a great ape, he had second thoughts about killing them. Now here we have a fighter who has a history of helping Frieza conquer planets and really killing many people. And yet here he has a soft spot. Why? Well, we find out in the Dragon Ball Super 77th manga chapter that thanks to his connection with his wife Gine and his newborn son Kakarot at the time, he had a gut feeling, and it gave him a bit of sympathy towards Granola and his mom. Bardock would have another gut feeling later on, 3 years later in fact, which we'll discuss in the next section. Now this gut feeling, to me, comes off like pretty lazy writing, and I'm not a big fan of it, but in case you are wondering why Toriyama chose to change Bardock into being a much more sensitive guy, there is a possible reason for that, which I'll get to here in a minute. So Bardock teams up with Granola's mother, as well as the lone Namekian guardian of the Dragon Balls for Planet Cereal, Monaito, to protect them because he has a gut feeling they may be important in the future. Or perhaps he was overcome with guilt and chose not to kill a woman or a child. That's up to you to decide. But Bardock manages to get into a scuffle with the Heater Gang, who wound up being the villains of this arc and the ones who conspired with Frieza to sell the planet to the Empire, and the ones that pretty much drew the invasion to Planet Cereal. When Elec of the Heater Gang fires a blast from his gun at Granola's mom, which would end up fatally wounding her, Bardock steps up into action and becomes a hero, which would ultimately lead to the survival of both Granola and Monaito, key elements in the Granola arc. Now, why did Toriyama choose to go in this direction? Well, Toriyama himself has never actually commented on it, so it's kind of up for interpretation, but my interpretation is that the Toriyama that is writing modern Dragon Ball, that is to say the one that is writing Dragon Ball from 2008 and beyond, not the one that wrote the original manga in the 80s and 90s, is a very different man. Toriyama as a writer is not the same man he was back in the day. I've talked about this before on numerous videos. Toriyama now has already experienced a long life. He's got children who are growing up. He's got a family established. When he was first hungry and in the game, he was a younger man and didn't really have the benefit of hindsight. If you notice a lot of writers who usually peak in their 20s and 30s, when they get older, they tend to kind of soften up and write different kinds of stories. And Toriyama nowadays is a very different man, and thus his idea of Bardock, which was never really his idea, the original character, as I said, was created by Koyama, but his idea of Bardock was that he was a bit more of a pure person. Although I wouldn't consider him pure by any stretch of the imagination, he certainly had more empathy for the life of others. And most fans don't like this version of Bardock, and I understand why, but really Toriyama's true idea behind Bardock and Gine and their relationship to Goku does change context of the original manga. He, without question, is doing a retcon. This is retroactive continuity at its finest, because none of this was known during the original run of Dragon Ball, and thus we all assume the Bardock special was it. However, this is it, at least from the eye of Toriyama. In the next section, we're going to go over Dragon Ball Minus and discuss what his story was, how it differs from the Bardock special, and some of the changes it brought about to the lore of Dragon Ball. Let's talk about the final days of Planet Vegeta and the way that Toriyama portrayed the story. Dragon Ball Minus is a pretty easy story to follow because it's only a few pages. Even though the story was expounded upon in Dragon Ball Super Broly, I do recommend that people read Dragon Ball Minus at least once. But in this video, I'm going to tell you everything right now anyway, so maybe you can skip that. So in Dragon Ball Minus, Bardock and several others were on a mission to capture a planet for the Frieza Force, but they get called to return to Planet Vegeta for some unbeknownst reason. Bardock ruminates on this choice multiple times, unsure of what Frieza's plot is, but having a strange feeling that something bad is about to happen. Unlike the original TV special where Bardock knew what was going to happen based on the curse that was put on him, here it's all about instinct and intuition, which just seems a tiny bit less interesting, maybe a lot less interesting than what happened to him in the special. But remember, this is Toriyama's Bardock. We have some moments of Bardock arriving on the planet, meeting up with Gine, and talking to some friends about the mission, still being a bit unsure and unsettled by Frieza's choice to bring everyone back to Planet Vegeta. Frieza had been thinking about this for over a month, letting his paranoia get to him. In the original Dragon Ball manga, the reason as to why Frieza destroyed the planet was because he feared the Saiyans gaining a new sense of power and ganging up on him, because he knew that every time they fought, they would get a power boost, and at one point, if multiple got a power boost and ganged up on him, it might end up being a problem. So Frieza chose to destroy them for that reason. Then later on we found out that the real reason was because Frieza was paranoid that one of them might actually become a legendary Super Saiyan, Densetsu no Super Saiyajin. And in Dragon Ball Minus, Frieza even mentioned Super Saiyan God, which had not been a twinkle in Toriyama's mind back in 1990 when he was writing the original manga. Now in 2013, Battle of Gods had already been released to theaters, and we kind of knew about the God lore, so Toriyama chose to incorporate that into the backstory. It seems like a cheap connection, and not really necessary. With Bardock's paranoia consuming him, he chose to send Kakarot away from the planet just in case something were to happen to it, and his intuition was true. So we have a heartwarming scene where he and Gine send Goku off to Earth to begin the story of Dragon Ball. But in the original television special, Goku was sent to Earth as a baby to take it over by the Frieza Force so that it could eventually be sold. We found out from Raditz in the early Dragon Ball Z episodes that the Frieza Force would send babies, infants, to worlds that did not have strong fighters but had full moons. That way they could arrive on the planet, eventually stare at the full moon, become a great ape, then destroy all life on the planet due to its rampage, and eventually the Frieza Force would return to the planet to sell it, and off we go from there. This is drastically different. This comes off like a lot more of a Superman ripoff with Kal-El and Jor-El taking the place of Goku and Bardock, as opposed to the more creative story that we got in the original continuity. Now, in Dragon Ball Minus, we did not actually see Frieza exterminate the planet, but in Dragon Ball Super Broly, they did show the scene. And at one point, Bardock does try to do something, but his efforts are wasted because Frieza joyfully destroyed the planet with nobody to stop him. Although there were a few survivors, Bardock and Gine were destroyed, and Goku would land on Earth and fulfill his destiny of becoming the main character of the story of Dragon Ball. What other stories does Toriyama have in his back pocket when it comes to Bardock? I can tell you that a lot of fans want him to come back and appear and meet Goku, but based on an interview Toriyama had years ago, he stated that it was not likely Bardock would return, and that even if he did, he'd be too weak to compete with anybody else right now. So it doesn't seem like Bardock will ever actually come back into the present, but understand that that could change because Toriyama has changed his mind about so many things throughout the years, made so many changes and brought characters back, like Broly, for example, being rewritten, and now the Red Ribbon Army and Dragon Ball Superhero having a comeback. So you never know what the future holds for Bardock. And if nothing else, we may at least get more stories of him when he was alive, going on adventures, like what happened in the Granola arc. Thank you for watching, have a great day, and if you like this video, check these out as well.